Hey everybody. So now we're going to be talking about Asia, where we're talking about all the different races from all over the world, and we're looking at it through this lens of four major lessons that we as human beings need to learn. We need to learn how to be an individual, how to be part of a community, how to be logical, and how to have faith. And so in Asia, they very much show how people in general think of each of these four things as really two spectrums. There's individuality versus being part of a community, and then there's logic versus faith. And Asia is really split up into two cultural centers, China and India. Now, today we're talking about China, the logical, rational side. Not so much India. We'll get to that probably tomorrow, where India is faith. It's entirely driven by faith. And so, first off, I probably have to apologize for the past couple videos. Listening back to them, I realized, wait a second, I'm saying stuff like, oh, in terms of Europe and Africa and China, as if China's a continent. But really what I was thinking of was this video. I had this video in my head, so I apologize if that offended anyone, but pretty much what I meant to say was China is the center culturally of Asia. That all the different Asian countries start with Chinese culture, and then that flows out and dissipates and dilutes itself and mixes with other stuff and becomes its own thing. And so this is not to say that any individual Asian country is tied down by whatever China says. Quite the opposite. So many Asian countries took what China did, the good things about what China has, and made it their own thing, and improved upon it the way that they saw it. And so that's why we see so many great things coming out of Asia. Is because, yeah, China was the cultural center, and their way of thinking was so powerful and influential. But over the millennia, so many different countries, so many different people had the benefit to take what China did and come up with their own version of it, their own style. Take from other places as well and build up to something even better. This is fundamentally why America is so great. And that is why Asia is so great too. So many places in Asia are great precisely because they started with what China said, because, hey, China made themselves known, that's for sure. And then they did their own thing. They improved upon it, built on it. And that's good. And that's something to be applauded. But we're going to be talking about specifically just China today. Not to belittle all of these other places, but rather to have one common cohesive theme where we can talk about one thing, and then that can tell you a little bit about all of the other things around it. About how, Japan and Korea very much took Chinese culture and grew it in their own way. And Japan and Korea are doing great today, precisely because they did this, because they grew from the Chinese format into something more than just that. And then you have the places down south like Laos and Thailand. And they are doing something different as well. And they are having an amazing culture in their own right precisely because they took the stuff from China and made it their own, did their own thing with it. And so all over Asia, China has an impact. Huge, massive impact. But it is through the growth and evolution of those ideas that you truly get the best of it. And so China is one of the first major countries in the world. They were one of the first civilizations, and they built on that. They grew and excelled and brought in more and more people. Because you see, one thing that the Chinese people is really good at is bringing more people in. China is not full of Chinese people. Han Chinese people are the majority in China, sure. But there's a lot of minorities in there, cultural and racial minorities in different parts of China. And that's precisely because China has this idea that you bring in more people, and that makes you stronger. And when you bring in more and more people, that makes you even more strong. And so, in some way, you can say that's kind of like community. I don't know how much they end up valuing those people. We'll get into that in a second. But it's definitely not individualism. One thing that China is very much lacking is people having the idea that they are an individual and they have their own life, their own dreams and desires and ambitions. And so it's hard to grow from that. When you don't see yourself as an individual, it's hard to improve. It's hard to grow and excel. And I'm going to quote someone to tell you this idea, because obviously I'm not Chinese. I didn't live through this, right? But I truly believe this is the case, and I'll share with you someone else who seems to think this is the case as well. So you may have heard of him. His name is Mao Zedong, which is the first leader of communist China. And so they're having this revolution. They're taking over China. They're making it all Marxist. And what Mao says is from his book of quotations. So not only is this something that he said, this is something that he wants everyone forever to remember he said. This is important to how he sees the world. And what he says is, apart from their other characteristics, the outstanding thing about China's 600 million people is that they are poor and blank. That's in quotes. Poor and blank. This may seem like a bad thing, but in reality, it is a good thing. Poverty gives rise to the desire for changes, the desire for action, the desire for revolution. On a blank sheet of paper, free from any mark, the freshest and most beautiful characters can be written. The freshest and most beautiful pictures can be painted. And this is precisely the thing about China. They're not individuals. Very much not. They're not seen that way by their leaders. Not really by their family either. And so, who taught them to think about themselves, to grow as their own person in their own right? Not really anyone. And so, they are a blank sheet of paper. Nothing individualistic about it. No marks. No anything. They're empty, blank. And if you want to have a thriving civilization, that's a good thing. Because then your leaders can write on you and paint you any color, any design that they want. They can make you into anything. You are malleable like clay. And you can make anything out of those kind of people. It's just that they're not going to be motivated. They're not going to be inspired. They're not going to be skilled. They're going to be, by and large, like clay. Lumps of glorified dirt that someone has to muscle and shape into something useful. And this is a very toxic view of people. And this is not my view of Chinese people. This is the view that Chinese leaders have had of their people for millennia. Mao is not the first one to see people this way. Most dynasties did see people this way. This is why they were dynasties. Because some person would sit on their throne in some city far away and dictate to people that they never met, that they didn't understand, that they had no appreciation for, and told them what they should do. That was what China was. Pretty much always. And so, when China would grow, when China had more and more land, the only way you can handle an empire that huge before modern communication, oh my goodness, the only way you could handle it is to delegate it to someone else. And so China is famous for this massive bureaucracy. But you see, this is where you get their strength. It's certainly not in individualism, and not really in community either. Their strength is their logic and their reason. And they are probably the first culture that came up with a true meritocratic system. And even today, even in communist China, it's more or less meritocratic. The idea that you move up in the ranks because you did a good job. That was something that China always had. And so, you have these two fundamental forms of Chinese thought. The first one is this highly ambitious, very logical way of thinking, where you say, well, I can rise through the ranks. I can raise myself to higher ranks in this bureaucracy, and then I'll have more power. And I'll have more control over my life. Because I'll be in control of so many other people's lives. And that's the game. That's how you play. And so throughout history, there are accounts of different Chinese leaders who thought that way, and they climbed from the dirt poor bottom up and up and up and up until they were at the very tippy top. And that is a very logical, methodical way to do things. That if someone's excelling, well, maybe they should be given more responsibility. And that's why China has prospered all these many years. It's because they do care about performance, about how good you are at something. But then, with such a tight bureaucracy, if you aren't one of those best people, the best and brightest, the one able to move up those ranks, now you can understand why the stereotype of Chinese people being good at math comes from. Because if everyone is working extremely hard to be the best they can be, because otherwise they'll be ground into dust. Well, yeah. No one wants to be a blank sheet of paper. No one wants that. And if you're not allowed to put any marks on your sheet of paper yourself, then you, by God, are going to do something where you're not the one getting marked, you're the one doing the marking. And that's why so many Chinese people are great at math and science and all of these different types of things. It's because it was expected of them. Because if they had any hope of mattering, of being significant in the world, well then they had to. I remember growing up, one of my friends, he was Chinese, and he would have to go to Saturday school. So whereas I went to Sunday school, which is this learning of faith, he went to Saturday school, which is, oh, you know all that stuff you learned during the week? Yeah, that was easy mode. This is Saturday school, where you're going to learn all of your Chinese characters. You're going to learn all the maths that they didn't teach you during the week because of this low-class education in America. Psh, whatever. Like, that's what they did. And so when my friend is working literally like 20% harder than I am, because he's going to school for 20% longer, well, of course he's going to be better than me. I mean, yeah, there's a certain amount of ability and stuff, and I think I was actually smarter than him in an individual sense, and so, you know, I'm more than kept up. But yeah, he's working way harder. Of course he's going to be good at math. Right? And that's what happens. Generation after generation, you get good or you get out. And that's what leads to this second mode of handling this kind of bureaucracy. The first one being, you rise up and you do the absolute best you can, peak performance, absolutely everything you can, so that way you can crawl up that hierarchy and be in that bureaucracy, so you're not the one getting written on, you're writing on other people. Well, the other way to do it is, if you don't get to be your own person, then why worry? Why care? If you don't get to write your own life, then why would you be engaged in life? And that's this idea that's very popular in China, especially now that there's so much less reason to work hard. Where so many people are like, not my problem. Someone else's problem. Someone else will take care of it. Someone else will fix it. I don't have to do anything. I'll do my bare minimum to get by, and then chill, relax, disengage. Because if I were engaged and I understood deep down that, I don't matter, that no one cares about me, no one looks at me as a person, no one values me, well, if I cared about that and looked at it that way, oh my gosh, I'd probably be depressed. So instead, disengage. Don't touch it. Don't think about it. Don't work too hard. And you see, this is precisely why China runs off of numbers. Because when most people hate your system so much that they are chronically disengaged from it, absolutely, you need a lot of people to get things moving. And this is why I say that so many of the countries around China have improved upon that. Because they don't have a soul-crushing bureaucracy. Yes, there is a lot of ways where, there's more nepotism. There's less ability to move up and rank up and be greater based on your own merits, based on your own efforts. There is less of that in a lot of ways. But only 1% of society can be the top 1% by definition. So 99% of people are going to be the 99%, no matter how smart or talented they are. They're going to be the 99% because that's what numbers mean. And it's logical and reasonable to say, let's bring our absolute best and brightest to the task so that way they can make the world a better place. But it is absolutely selfish and wrong to say that the 99% don't get a say, because they're not the best and the brightest, and so they don't matter. And so this is the great benefit of China, where they have this meritocracy where the absolute best succeed and the best move on and get more power, more responsibility, so they can make it a better place. And that's why it works at all. Because the 99%, they couldn't care less. And I'm not saying that 99% of China is like this, right? I don't know the actual percentage. There's plenty of people who are hardworking and are ambitious, and they try their best to reach that higher level, and maybe they don't make it, but then their kids do, right? As a matter of fact, one interesting way to see this, to talk about this, is not even to look at China. Like I said, the Chinese culture moves all over Asia. And all over Asia, they respond to what China has said about culture, about what they've said about society. And one interesting place is Thailand. We have some family friends that live over in Thailand, and they talk to us about Thai and Thai Chinese people. That is to say, the people who were born and raised in Thailand. But then there's some people who are ethnically Thai. And then there's the people who are ethnically Chinese. Meaning, like 1,000 years ago or so, yeah, their ancestors did come from China. Like, irrelevant, right? Completely irrelevant, except for their culture at home. Their culture at home is very different. And what everyone notes, according to our family friend, what everyone says in Thailand, is that the Thai Chinese are ambitious, go-getters, business people. And so many of the businesses you see are probably run by Thai Chinese people. Whereas the Thai, they're much more chill and relaxed and go with the flow, and they have more fun. So if you want to have fun with someone, have a good time, you probably go with the Thai. If you want to be serious and get things done, you go with the Thai Chinese. And that's what makes Thailand the place it is today. It's because you got both. And so it's interesting. Because it shows that when you take this highly ambitious family culture, where you say you have to be the absolute best, otherwise you're nothing. You're worthless unless you're the top 1%, right? It's all or nothing in China. You're either the best, in which case you move up and you matter, or you're not the best, in which case, so what? Doesn't matter. And here is where we see so many Asians come to America, and they do so amazingly well. And that's because when you're trying to be the absolute best, the absolute pinnacle in order to matter, and then you come to America and say, no, dude, you're a person. You matter already. That is such a relief to them. And that is why Chinese Americans are some of the best Americans. And not just China, but like all of Asia. Asian Americans do better than the average American from anywhere else in the world. Precisely because the one thing that they were missing most, the one thing they were starved for, was individuality. They had tons of logic and tons of reason, a fair bit of community, and some faith. But what they were starved for was individuality, of mattering as a person, as an individual. And that's one thing in America we have heaps and gobs of. And that's why Asians do well in America, because the only thing they were missing was validation on a personal level. Of saying you matter because you're you, not because of your family, not because of your legacy, not because of your position or your title, but because you're a person. And that's all they needed. That's all they ever wanted. And that's why Asian Americans are some of the most successful Americans, because that's all they wanted was exactly what America gives you. And that's beautiful. And that's amazing. And my family has had the pleasure to know many Asian Americans. And every single one I've met, they're amazing. They do amazing things. And that's precisely because no one's holding them back anymore. Because they were trying to excel and succeed over and over and over again. And they kept getting pressed down because they say, no, you're not that best. You're not the best. You're not top. You're not on the top. You're not the best. Get down there. Let someone else do it. But now they get to try. And that's why we have better Asians in America than in Asia. Because all they needed was permission. All they needed was to say, hey, you do your own thing. You make something awesome. I'm sure we'll like it. And that's the story of China. And obviously, this story changes a little bit when you look at Japan and you say, oh, well, this is not the dynastic kind of rule system, but rather a more feudal system. Yeah, Japan's going to be different. Korea's going to be different. Thailand's going to be different. All the different countries in Asia are different because they take a different take on this. A lot of them reject it because it is so depressing to not be a person, to not be seen as a person. But at the same time, you can't argue with results. You can't argue with one of the first civilizations in the world still today being near the top of productivity and impact. They're one of the most populated countries in the world. They're big. And they're influential. And so it's hard to be living next to such a massive empire and say something like, hey, I don't think they have it right. So of course it's going to impact people all over Asia. How could it not? But at the same time, Asia's not one country. Not even China is one nation. China is many nations tied together through conquest and practicality. It's not a community. Because when you don't respect people as individuals, how could you build on that? How could you have a community where people love each other and care for each other? Not to say that they don't care about each other, not to say that they don't, do things to help each other. They absolutely do. but all they were ever missing was just that spark of individuality, that permission to say, hey, even though you're not the top 1%, give it a try. Maybe you'll do something cool.